Number 5, brighten up your environment. Brighten up your environment. Environment has a lot to do with what happens in a service. If people are too hot or they're too cold, it doesn't matter how good your message is, how good the music is. You need to do an EIR on your building, an environmental impact report. And you need to look at your building from the eyes of a visitor. Now, the moment people walk into your building, they're, again, making judgment calls. And even before the service starts, they're going, well, this church does this church does this. And your facilities, your grounds are making impressions. And as I said, first impressions, you never get a second chance to make a first impression. Have you ever walked into a room and it changed your mood? Of course you have. So what mood do you want your church building to give? What kind of mood do you want your church building to give? This room right here, we want this church to be known as a family. The bigger the church gets, the more it becomes a performance. And the problem is today that a lot of people want to turn the lights down, put on a spotlight, and what is that saying? This is a performance. The only thing that matters, if the lights are down and the spotlight's on me, you don't matter. But in a family, you never sit in the dark with your family unless you're watching TV. And so the Bible says God is light and in him is no darkness at all. If you want to create a family spirit, you got to turn up the lights. One of the reasons we've got bright lights on either side and lights here, and by the way, when we build our worship centers, notice the floor is flat. Nobody goes to a family with a tilted, no home has tilted floors in it. When you tilt the floor of your building, you're saying, performance. It's all about performance. If the church is a family, your building should say, we're a family. We're all level here. We're all on the same thing. And so the building has a lot to say about your theology. And you need to notice, what is our building saying? And you need to ask this question, what message is our building giving off? I mean, we may say we're friendly, but the building could say we're cold and unfriendly. We could say Christ is relevant, but the building's out of date. We could say we've got it all together, and the building says everything's falling apart. We could say we're winners, and the building could say there's low morale here. I remember driving by a little church in Australia, and there were weeds all over, and the wall was cracked, and the windows were painted over, and it looked like a mess, and then the title said, Miracle Faith Center. I went, well, there ain't any miracle going on there right now, obviously, because paint was peeled and the weeds were 2 feet high. Now, here's the problem with your building. We overlook things after just 4 weeks. You don't notice what's wrong in your building after you've been there over and over and over and over. But a first-timer walks in and sees it. They walk in and they see the burned-out lights. You haven't noticed that burnt-out light bulb. They see the unmowed lawn. They see the dust. They see the chipped paint. They see the mop bucket in the closet. And your task is to think through what environment should be and then create it. I remember one time in a house we lived in years ago that the mirror cracked in our bathroom. And when that mirror cracked, it really, really bugged me. And I go, man, I don't like this mirror, this big crack. We've got to replace it. But I didn't do anything. The next week, it was still bugging me, but it didn't bother me as much, second week. The third week, it bothered me any less, and I still hadn't had time to go replace it. And the fourth week, I pretty much forgot it, and it stayed that way for the next year and a half. Why? I got used to how it looked. And you get used to how it looks in your church, and you don't realize this doesn't look that good. And sometimes just a fresh coat of paint and changing your light bulbs from 75 to 100 watt can bring revival. You go, what happened? Wow, the whole mood of this. Man, the church is more alive. You just turned up the lights. The problem is we overlook things at 4 weeks. And the fact is, most pastors, you as a pastor, you've never observed your own service from the back row. So you don't even know how it looks, because you've always been up on the stage. And what you might do is ask a photographer who hasn't been at the church for a long time to travel around on Sunday morning and photograph everything in your church. What's going on in children's buildings and what's happening in the patio, what's happening inside. And then look through those photos and study them and show those slides to your leaders and go, let's look at this. Have you ever seen this? Have you noticed this? Let me give you some factors that create a friendly environment. All right, write these down. Number one is lighting, and that is it bright enough? I already quoted this. God is light, and in him is no darkness at all. Lighting has a profound influence on people's mood. And you want to ask, is our facility bright enough? Darkness depresses. You don't have celebrations in the dark. If you do, you have fireworks going on. But most churches are too dark. I don't know why. But maybe it's conditioning from all those years we were in the catacombs. But we equate reverence with darkness and candles, and somehow we got the idea that dimming the lights makes it more spiritual. It's nonsense. It's actually opposite of what the Bible says. God is light, not dark. God is light, and in him is no darkness at all. So what you might want to do is secretly increase the wattage in your church and eliminate all the shadows across your speaker's face and brighten it up, and you just may have revival. Open up your windows and doors. If you've got windows, open them up. Studies have shown now fresh air actually stimulates your brain better than refrigerated or air-conditioned air. And that's true in businesses, it's true in offices, it's certainly true in church. So if you've got curtains, take them down. And when we started Saddleback, we were in Laguna Hills High School, which was in a theater that had no windows at all. It was dark, 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 dark. But it did have 4 sets of double doors, and I made them keep every door open the entire service, even if it was pouring down rain outside, and you could hear the rain. It's kind of a cool thing, because we wanted to bring as much light into the darkness. I'm sure that God would love to say to 10,000 churches, let there be light. Let there be light. They once did a survey, and 62% of members said that they were dissatisfied with their facilities. And the 2 greatest complaints that came off in this national study was it's too dark and it's too warm. It's too dark and it's too warm. Those are the 2 biggest complaints members have, not unbelievers. Visitors, by the way, happen to like it on the cool side because they're already nervous anyway. So they're sweating. So if you got a hot room and they're already nervous, their temperature is soaring. By the way, that's the second thing. Lighting is temperature. The temperature. Now, as a pastor who spent 15 years in unheated and unair-conditioned buildings, I could say this with conviction. Temperature can destroy your service. If it's too hot or if it's too cold. All the best planned services are destroyed in a matter of minutes. If it's too hot or if it's too cold, people just check out mentally. I'm freezing to death or I'm burning up. So it's got to be, you got to watch that constantly. Another one, number 3, is sound. Sound can make or break the best prepared message. And so I would say spend as much as you can on your sound system. Buy the best that you can personally afford. You may not have a building, but you should have a good sound system. We didn't have a building for 15 years, but we had a state-of-the-art sound system. You don't skimp here. We've spent $1 million on sound because you're in the communication business. And insist, that you have good microphones and whatever style you happen to use, whether it's a lavalier or whatever, but a tinny, fuzzy sound incapacitates the most gifted musician or the most gifted teacher, communicator, and nothing can destroy a holy moment faster than feedback. Anybody want to agree with that? May we bow for prayer. Wow. Okay, we should God's not here. Let's go home, guys. All right. Number 4, seating arrangement is an important thing. Seating arrangement. Both the comfort of your seats and the arrangement of the seats dramatically affect the mood of the service. The mind can only absorb what the seat can endure. And Satan loves to use this distraction. If you can get away with it in an existing church, if you can replace the pews, I would advise that. The only place where people are actually forced to sit on benches are like cheap bleachers. And you know you're in the cheap seats at that point. People today are accustomed to personal space. So if you can get rid of pews and get into seats, that's better. And by the way, if people are forced to sit too close together, which by the way, those bleachers, chairs are too close together. If they're forced to sit too close together, they're very uncomfortable. As America gets older, you need a minimum of 18 inches. A minimum in 18 inches. And today, box seats are the most prized seats at any event, and people want their personal space. 21 inches is even better in today. Important thing about chairs. Always set up fewer chairs than you're going to need. Because then when you have to bring in more, it builds excitement. If you set up, your church can have too many seats. If you got 1,000 seats, you got 400 people coming. 400 people looks like nothing. And actually, some churches don't grow because they have too much room. I remember when we started our singles ministry many, many years ago, and we were actually in a real estate building. And they asked me, how many seats should I set up? Now, I was praying for 50 people to show up at this singles kickoff. I told them, I said, set up 20 chairs. 20 chairs. Why? Because if they wanted to set up 100 chairs, then the first person walks in, sits here, the second person sits 14 seats over here, the third person sits 13 seats back over here, and it's all spread out, and there's no relationship, no connection. So I said, set up 15, 20 chairs. Then everybody came in the room, sat close to each other. And then when they started coming in, we got set up more chairs. They kept coming in. We ended up with about 75 people that night. But the enthusiasm was great because it wasn't like, we set up 200 chairs and only 75 people showed up. Does that make sense? So always set up fewer chairs than you need, and then have your ushers ready to add another row. That builds enthusiasm and excitement. Too many chairs can kill the mood of a service. Space, that goes along with it. The rule of space is don't have too much or too little. You say, thank you very much, Rick. That's very helpful. Either extreme will limit your growth. Many churches are in a building too big for them. They're an auditorium, 200 people in a seating auditorium that seats 750. It's hard to build a sense of community when you've got 200 people in a seating of 750 and create that warm and enthusiasm. I recently went to our Saddleback Buenos Aires, and I loved that church. And they had just added their 5th service. This is a church that's 2 years old. 2 years old. And the auditorium maybe seats 130, 140 people. But with 130 people, it kept getting packed up. The weekend I was there, of course I was there, so attendance went up. There were 1,500 people. You imagine the enthusiasm you got when you got 1,500 people showing up for 5 services and 140 seats? It's like there's a great energy in the room. Now, they could have said, Rick, our senior pastor's coming. We're going to go rent a stadium or a room that's got, 2,000 seats in it. And 1,500 people would still not fill the room. So it's always better to have, too much or too little is not good. By the way, when your building gets about 80% filled, you need to start another service. Because a building is not going to fill 100%. People will come to a building filled 100% for a few weeks, but they won't do it year after year after year. And this is the 80% capacity role. Once you get to that amount, you need to start another service. Very important also is the distance of the pulpit to the people. The smaller your church is, the closer your pulpit needs to be the people. I've spoken in a lot of small churches where I've asked them, would you take the pulpit off the stage and move it down here to the front row? Because if you've got 50 people and you're 40 feet back, the further away I get from you, the less impact I've got. And so You want to put your pulpit as close to the people. See this room right here? It's not deep, it's wide. And the reason why is it makes you feel closer to me, even though we've got a lot of people in here. If we had this in a traditional thing like a hallway, the people at the very back, you get beyond about 125 feet, people start checking out. You don't have a family anymore, you've got a concert hall. So space is an important thing you have to look at. And you may need to take some seats out. You may need to rope things off. You may need to pull your pulpit down. And then as the church gets bigger, you can pull it back. Decorations are important in creating a friendly environment. The cheapest, the best are plants. Beauty inspires. By the way, man was made to live in a garden. Have you said, people say, well, I feel close to God in nature. Well, of course you do. God made us to live in the garden. He didn't make you to live in a high skyscraper. Man was made to live in a garden. It's not by accident that the most familiar psalm is Psalm 23, the Lord is my shepherd. He leads me beside still waters and green pastures. I can visualize that. It actually relaxes me. And when you've got water and you've got greenery, and one of the reasons we have these windows like this, you look outside, and while I'm teaching, a plane might go by and go, oh, what Rick is saying actually relates to the real world. It's not like we're hunkering in a bunker and we're huddled away from the world and no, you can see the world. And when it's stormy outside. And when it's rainy outside. And the colors of the different seasons. So if you're starting out, put plants wherever you are. Let people walking in, at least something's alive here. That's a good thing. It's pretty cheap. I would be careful about overdoing, a Christian symbols, that don't make sense. So obviously, cross. Everybody knows what a cross is. Cross is a good thing. But I'm talking about symbols like chalices and crowns and doves with little fire coming out their tail. What do they do? Go to Taco Bell? What's a dove with a fire coming out its tail? Mm-hmm. So just be careful that you've got symbols that are explainable. Nurseries, make sure they're clean, they're safe. If you want to reach young couples, you better put a priority on your nursery. It better look great. You want to, we have a check-in system with a beeper and all of those kind of things. Safe, sanitized, and then of course, restrooms. You should have a restroom brigade that checks your restrooms after every single service, so that somebody didn't throw up in there or have a problem or whatever. Clean, safe, odor-free restrooms are important to church growth. They may forget your sermon, but the odor of that bathroom will linger on for months and months and months. And if you are like we were, where you're using rented facilities, you may have to go in and clean those, bathrooms in the high school that you're in or whatever, every single week, and you freshen them up and light a candle in there and get it smelling good. Things like, why are we giving you all these things? Well, the goal is Titus 2:10, so that in every way they will make the teaching about God's Savior attractive. We want people to be attracted. We want it to be attractive.